Hey everybody, welcome to the TIMGA Podcast. My name is Dr. Mohamed Khalif, and today I'm joined with a special guest, Ariana Garfolo. She is the senior grant writer at Collaborative Partners Initiative, an agency that write grants and does a lot of other services for small businesses and nonprofits. Ariana, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Thanks, Mohammed. I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me today.
Of course, of course. Ariana, a little bit of people who don't know about what your team does at Collaborative Partners Initiative. Can you tell a little bit about what your team does and how you guys help nonprofits and community members?
Yeah, absolutely. So, here at Collaborative Partners Initiative, we also go by CPIN. We are a small business where women ran and veteran led, and we were founded in 2020 in Tacoma, Washington. So, we exist to seek and secure resources for primarily nonprofits as well as some small businesses as well. So we do a lot of grant writing as well as other types of support, such as post award support. So if organizations have gotten a grant award, we can help them manage that and do the reporting and the financial pieces of that. We also do capacity building for nonprofits that are looking to scale up or increase or improve their operations in some way. We do technical assistance projects where we, through various channels, we support grant applicants with improving their application, the writing and the structure, and making sure ideas are a good fit for grant proposals. And recently, we're adding on some marketing and social media as well. So we're really just responsive to the needs of the organizations that we see and always adding on new services as we can to meet the needs of the organizations in our community.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And I know you have a long history of writing grants and proposals. How did you get into space as a writer? Was it early in maybe like high school, middle school that you loved writing? How did you get into this space?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I have loved writing ever since I was a kid. I think I wrote my first play at age 7 on a yellow
Wow.
legal pad. So I have always enjoyed writing. In terms of my formal career path, I got a bachelor's degree in English and creative writing from Rollins College in Orlando, Florida, and then did a master's degree in literary and cultural studies at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And after that, I started my career in higher education. So I went on to work at Carnegie Mellon University. I worked in the admissions office for a while and got to see some of the workings of admissions and how that works. And I also worked in the English department. I was the program coordinator for our first year writing program. So I staffed all of those classes and did placement testing and did administrative support for that program. And from there, my career in higher education continued. I took on a variety of roles. I was a professor for English 101 courses at Valencia College in Florida. I also worked at a few tutoring and writing centers, helping students with their writing and in various disciplines. And so that grew into me doing some freelance work and starting my own freelance consulting company where I did admissions coaching for students who were applying for primarily master's and PhD programs after college. And I worked with some college transfer and other sort of college applicants as well.
Yeah.
And so I really loved that work. I loved working with students. I really found sort of a niche in working on applications and helping folks shape their writing in that way, and decided that I wanted to deepen that and had learned about grant writing. I also was having a desire to just be able to give back and do make sure that my work was impactful.
Yeah.
So I did a grant writing certificate course at Seattle Central College once I had moved out to the Pacific Northwest here. And so that's where I learned grant writing, which I did freelance for a while through my business. And then almost exactly 3 years ago, I ended up joining Collaborative Partners Initiative, and I've been here as our senior grant writer since then.
Wow, that's amazing. What a journey. And I know like this question, you're perfect to answering this question because of your role in working at admissions offices and hopefully maybe you get an opportunity to read some of the statements that applicants sent into admission. But IMGs are required to send a when they're applying to residency, they're required to send a personal statement just talking about their history and why they're interested in this program and what makes them unique. So have you like tell me about your experience on how IMGs can write the perfect personal statement. I know nothing's perfect, but how can they tell their story and kind of help it resonates? And in the world of AI, everybody's just kind of like dumping things in AI and getting maybe like generic responses. But how can you add that personal touch into those personal statements?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I've helped many folks with their personal statements. I would say something that is helpful is just getting all of your ideas out. I think that something I see folks struggle with a lot is just figuring out, how to start. What is that opening sentence? How do you lead in? And I think that it can be a way to get over your writer's block is just to put all of your ideas down on paper and don't worry about what that first sentence is going to be. You can figure that out later. Just get all of your ideas down on paper as a draft. It is really important that you're coming through with your personal story. Like you mentioned, AI does exist as a tool now, but what it's going to write is going to be generic and isn't going to be specific to you. And in your personal statement, you really want to shine and show who you are as a candidate. I think that things to think about and things to highlight. We kind of shared this anecdote about how I've loved writing ever since I was a kid and started writing plays when I was young.
Yeah.
And even though that's the case, even though I've always loved writing, that wouldn't be something that I would want to share in my personal statement because many people have similar stories. I actually see a lot of students come and they have their personal statement and they started off by saying, ever since I was 5 years old, I've been interested
Yeah.
in whatever their field is. And so, that actually is not something that is going to set you apart as a candidate. So even though it can be tempting to trace the route all the way back to the beginning of when your interest in medicine started, I would suggest that it is more impactful to just focus on the experience that you do have because of course you've made it to this point of writing your personal statement. You've had a lot of experience that you've gained, and so it's better to focus on that experience, and that is what is going to make you unique as a candidate.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's very incredibly true. And I always see people struggle with that first line. Even myself when I was applying to residency, for the first couple of months, I would struggle with that first line, and you want to come up with like the perfect, I don't know, poem or some kind of like really to be or not to be, some kind of like really, out of the box type of sentence. But it always just comes down, and you're right, and everybody says that, like, hey, everybody starts their and personal statement with I've always wanted to be a doctor since I was 10 years old because I saw a stethoscope of my primary care doctor, and and it was just like just changed my world. And you're right, a million other students are saying that. Um, like, what are like? Is there like a specific type of template people can because every story has like an opening, a beginning, a middle, and an end. Is there a specific kind of like structure that people should think about? Hey, like first of all, I want to open my personal statement with my childhood, or should it be something unique that happened to me? And in the middle, I want to talk about a story about how that connected with a patient. In the end, I just want to talk about the program. Is there like a specific structure that people should have in mind?
Yeah, I think it can vary from essay to essay, but a lot of times what I found when I was editing personal statements for folks is that I would end up suggesting that a sentence that they had maybe at the very end, I would often find that I moved that up to the beginning. So a lot
Mm,
of times people will use their whole statement to get to the end where they say, and because of all of this, this is what I'm interested in. Like, this is the specific field of medicine that I want to go into. These are the types of patients I want to work with. This is my area of research specialty.
Mm.
A lot of times people will wait until the very end of the statement to say that, but I often would take that and put that at the beginning of the statement because even though it might be simple, like just stating what field of medicine you want to go into, what specialty you're interested in, I think that can actually be a good way to start, and then you can work backwards and talk about the experience you have that has led you to that. So
Yeah.
I think that it's not, you don't need to write a poem at the beginning. Like a
Yeah.
lot of times just a simple opening line can be really impactful if it's just straightforward and you are introducing yourself and what you're interested in and the research and professional interests that are specific to you.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a really good point. And what are like as a reader, like let's say you're reading an IMG's essay, what are the big red flags? If you could give me like for example, one that always people tell me is if there's a spelling mistake, that's a red flag. Even though you're a really great person, it's just it shows that you haven't put enough time into it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that that is always a smart idea, just to make sure your spelling, your grammar, all of that stuff is fine tuned. Something that I often suggest to folks is just to have somebody else read your essay that isn't doesn't know your story super well. So for example, like don't give it to your partner or a parent or somebody that is really close to your story, but if you have maybe a coworker or someone that you're in a group with that doesn't know you as well, to just have them give it a read over, because something I see a lot is sort of jumps in logic where it makes sense to you because it's your story and so you know how X and Y tie together, and maybe the people really close to you understand that as well. But if you show that essay to someone who doesn't know you, they might be able to point out, hey, this doesn't make sense. There's a gap, and I don't understand how you got from point A to point B in your story. And so
Mhm.
you don't need somebody who's a professional writer necessarily to review your essay, but I do think having somebody look over it and just be able to find maybe those gaps in logic. That's a really common error that I see of just, things not really making sense and there being a gap and understanding of how you got from one place to another. And so that's something that just a second set of eyes might be able to help you point out and see.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Also like bias as well. Maybe like somebody is like, knows you really well and they don't pay attention to those small little details. I think you're right. Another like big common barrier I would say for IMGs is, IMGs are they don't get a lot of opportunities in interviews because of the residency spots are very less and competitive, and that's why you see a lot of states that are creating alternative licensing pathways because these spots are not enough to train, and also that's why we have like a shortage of physicians in the country. So and the work that TIMGA is doing is kind of connected with this a little bit, but often IMGs, because these are like these programs, there's not a lot of interviews that are coming out of these programs. IMGs are required to apply to a lot of programs. So sometimes they apply to 100 programs, sometimes 200, sometimes 300, depending on like how strong their application is. So a question that I often get is, do I have to write each personal statement tailored to that program? Do I have to mention their name? Like I want, for example, I'm going to OHSU, and I just mentioned like OHSU Medical Center. So is it basically, or can I say like your medical center or your program, which is make it a little bit generic? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I see this with applicants for graduate school and colleges as well, where folks are certainly applying for lots of different programs. And you're right, that question does come up a lot. So I think that as a base, you can use the same essay for all of the programs. I do think it can be beneficial to personalize a bit for each program because the interview kind of goes both ways, or I guess not the interview, but the opportunity to work at a certain place goes both ways. They want to know that you're a good fit for their residency or for their program, and you want to know that they're a good fit for you as well. And so I do suggest having a short paragraph, maybe just a couple of sentences about why you're applying for that program specifically. So, what is it that draws you to it? Do your areas of specialty match up? Is there a physician that you're particularly interested in working with? Things that you're particularly interested in doing at that program. So I do think that can be beneficial, but I don't think you need to rewrite the whole essay. So you're going to use your basic same essay for every application that you're doing, but you might consider tailoring just a few sentences just of why you're interested in this specifically.
Yeah, I agree with you because yeah, it is time consuming. You're right. And you might need to like spend a couple extra hours on it. But if you just edit like maybe like a couple of lines per personal statement, and you have like a folder of like 300 personal statements, I think that that is like a time investment that you have to do. But in the long run, somebody reading that versus like what everybody does, like it has a generic, and they might say, you know what, maybe this person took the time to really mention these stuff about us. Does that come across on like one of your reading applications? Hey, like this person who applied to this school, or this program that maybe you were a part of, like the effort comes across on paper.
It absolutely does. Yeah, the effort comes across on paper. It does take more time, like you said, but I do think it's worth it. And again, you don't have to spend hours per place that you're applying to, but even just a little bit of research and personalizing just those couple of sentences, I do think it shows that you are invested, that you really want to be accepted, and that you've really done your research and you're applying for a reason. And even though I totally understand that, it's just wild of having to apply for 1 to 300 different programs. Like that's a lot. That's certainly more than folks are applying to for college or other types of programs in general. But it still, I think, will be worth the effort of just putting in that touch and letting folks know who are reading that application that you haven't just sent out, you haven't just done an email blast of all of these applications. You've taken the time to be thoughtful about which places that you're applying for.
Yeah, yeah. And a lot of people ask me about and name dropping. Sometimes IMGs, they'll know like a previous IMG that went to that school or that's in that program, or like a teacher that they worked with, like they did a shadow experience with, or something like that. So, and sometimes that those people are not reading your letters. Maybe it's like maybe the program director, or it's the or is the admission staff, or uh, the selecting team or whatever. So should people name drop and add people that worked within that place, or should they just keep it generic?
I think that it can be woven in a good way, particularly if maybe you've shadowed a physician at that place. I think that would be good to add in just to show that you do have a connection to that hospital or medical facility. Talking about somebody that you've shadowed or worked with or worked on a project with, I do think that that would be really beneficial. That could go in the paragraph of a couple of sentences that's specific for each place where you're applying. In terms of if you know someone who is also there, that I think could be woven in as well. It might be less important than somebody that you've shadowed or worked with in a professional capacity, but it could be part of your paragraph about why you're interested in being there. You could say, having worked with this person who is part of your facility. They've spoken highly of it. I've learned X, Y, and Z about the culture at your facility. And so this is why I'm interested in applying. So I think that rather than just purely name dropping, you do want to weave it in a bit to the story that you're telling about why this particular facility is a good place for you to be at as well.
Yeah, yeah, and I agree. Is there like, but what if like you're like, how do you stay genuine? Like, for example, IMG sometimes they just want to get any opportunity they can, right? Like maybe if it's even like in the smallest rural town in America, they apply to that program so they can get the opportunity to practice. How do they like stay? How do they show on paper like a genuine interest?
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. I think again, just doing a bit of research about each place could be helpful. And maybe there is something within that small rural town that is interesting, or maybe the person has a desire to work with underserved populations to help people that have less access to care.
Yep.
So I think there can always be something. It's kind of like find the good, find the silver lining, and whatever. Maybe it's not the place that you're most excited about, but if you did end up being there, what would be the good that you could find? Is it that you have a desire to work with folks who might not have access to care? Things like that, I think, would be helpful to pull in as well, that are genuine. Don't make them up, but just find something that's good, even about places that might not have been your first choice or that you might not have expected.
Yep, that's amazing. Any last pieces of advice, Ariana, for our IMGs? I know you're having a webinar tomorrow as well, and a lot of people can ask you questions personally. But and if you guys, if this airs after the fact, you guys can check out the webinar on YouTube and get some more information. But any last pieces of advice for people who are right now thinking about writing their personal statements?
Yeah, absolutely. A piece of advice I always give about writing is just to be clear and concise, not to worry about being really fancy or using words that you might not usually use. I like to compare writing to storytelling, and think about even like books that you might have enjoyed, maybe even as a child. If you think about those, they don't have huge words in them, but you can still recall those books from childhood because you remember the characters, the setting, the place, was vivid. And so just to keep in mind that that isn't created by using really fancy vocabulary or elaborate sentence structure, but it's just being clear and descriptive. So I like to say that just to help folks maybe take a little bit of pressure off of their writing. You don't have to be really fancy or do anything out of the ordinary. You just want to be really clear, and again, just get a first draft out on paper and then work with that. Don't worry about starting with the first sentence. Just get your ideas on paper. Have a friend or somebody, a semi friend, somebody that doesn't know you well, look over it with you, see if they understand your story. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the webinar and talking more about all of these things as well.
That's amazing. Ariana Garfolo, everybody, senior grant writer at Collaborative Partners Initiatives. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing a little bit about your wisdom to IMGs. And we appreciate everything that CPAN does. And we hopefully we can have you on the show next time.
Amazing. Thank you so much. It's been wonderful to be here.